I'm tired of receiving offers for mini-computer collaborations. Most of them are low-end small computers that don't stand out in any features. Yet, they are advertised as gaming machines, and this is obviously a trap that you need to be careful with. Some of them do come with the same APUs as handheld devices, but the cheaper ones simply have low-power CPUs designed just for office tasks. That's why one brand caught my attention. This mini-computer from an unknown brand called King Hank offers something I haven't seen before. At first glance, it seems like any other of these common computers. A compact body made out of plastic that looks far from what we could call gaming. But there's something different in it. After taking out the computer, we discover a controller. Although it's quite basic, it comes from Gigabyte, a brand specialized in this, and I believe it's much better to have the cheapest product from this manufacturer than any other random Chinese one. So why are they doing this? Because this computer certainly doesn't stand out for its technical features. It has the same Intel N100 that we find in most mini-computers for office tasks. What does this have to do with gaming then? Because in fact, it has a secret weapon. Additionally, it has unusual specifications, 8GB of RAM and 750 of storage on 2 drives. And even more important, why is the second drive almost full? That's because it comes with Retrobat installed, a software for emulating a large number of video games from many consoles, with a very clean, dynamic and modern interface that brings all emulators and games into one place. And it comes with no less than 64,000 titles, games that we wouldn't be able to remember and enjoy again without emulating. If you've ever tried getting into emulation, you've probably realized how complex it can be. Retrobat doesn't eliminate the need for emulation programs, they're still necessary to run the games on Windows, but what it does is create a layer on top that simplifies, organizes and unifies everything. Now, from the same menu, I can access the emulators I want, with titles already installed like Pokémon Fire Red and Leaf Green, or Pokémon Emerald for Game Boy, and even Final Fantasy XII for PlayStation 2, or both Mario Kart for the Wii and Super Mario for the GameCube. And if you don't find your favorite title, you just have to download it and add it to the respective ROM folder for Retrobat to recognize it. And to make something clear, I'm not promoting piracy. I actually did my degree of video game development and 3D animation, so I always support developers, but these titles would be forgotten without emulators and their downloads. I found it a great success to be able to connect the computer and start any of these titles. This is exactly the big point of consoles, connecting and playing without having to deal with anything else. That has never been the case with emulators. You always had to go through a phase that could worsen the experience. So we have a computer with a very small footprint that barely makes any noise and has very low-end hardware. Will it have enough power to run everything we throw at it? This aspect, as I mentioned at the beginning, is what worries me the most about these computers, and it needs to be tested. Let's see then how far the performance of this small machine goes, because allow me to doubt about how capable this might be with a consumption of only 6 watts. For reference, any decent current processor is between 80 and 115 watts, or even the APUs of handheld devices like the GPT Win 4 or the ROG Ally have consumptions around 28 watts, which is almost 5 times more, and we all know they have just enough performance to play some games. With that nostalgic touch for those of my generation in Pokémon 5 Red for the Game Boy Advance, the game runs as expected, even with a customized screen layout that creates a more immersive experience. But let's be real, no one expects this title to have any difficulty. To complicate things then, still within Nintendo, I tried the remake of Pokémon Ruby on 3DS. It's important to see how that second screen works in emulators. In this case, performance-wise, we still have no issues, but the problem is that the 3DS bottom screen was touch-sensitive. In Pokémon, we can control it with the D-pad without a problem, but in Monster Hunter we can't. The menus work fine, but I cannot type on it. This is because the game was made to be controlled only with the touch screen. Here the solution was to force the game configuration to activate the touch-sensitive pointer. This way we have a cursor that we can move with the mouse or the controller and interact without a problem. Having overcome this issue, which seemed the most concerning, I moved on to the latest from Nintendo. Although we are talking about a game that wouldn't pose any difficulty for any current hardware, it reminds us that we are trying to play with something not designed for it, and although the Nintendo Switch cheats by using a lower resolution and a 30 FPS limit, here we can't even reach the 20s. After this, I need to see if it can handle any PlayStation titles that seem more demanding. Starting with the PSP, I'm sure these titles look better here than what they did on the handheld, the original one, thanks to upscaling, anti-aliasing and being able to run at 60 FPS. At least this is true for all the titles I've tried in this emulator. What a good console the PSP was, runs and how well its emulator works. Going back to our main concern, performance is equally good on PlayStation 2, where I can remember titles like Dragon Ball Budokai Tenkaichi 3. Although here, being the PlayStation 2 an emulator I've used before, I see some issues that we will talk about later when we discuss all the negatives I found. And now the hardest step, the one I have the most doubts about. The PlayStation 3 made a significant leap forward, and it's something we notice and doesn't favor this hardware. In Castlevania, it runs between 15 and 20 FPS, which could be considered playable, but not a good experience because we're not even at a proper resolution. Therefore, I installed some different games from PS3, and as I thought, we can't even reach 10 FPS in this. So it's a shame, but here we draw the line. We're hitting the limit of this small processor, and I was wondering if it was due to the CPU or the emulator, so I used the Xbox 360 to end up with similar results. The same thing happens, so it's not a configuration problem, but the physical limit of this hardware. For how well they've configured everything, I'm quite sure we only find one PS3 title because it must be one of the few that can run. In fact, there's not a single Xbox 360 game. Knowing these limits, it's time to get serious and reveal all my thoughts on the product. As I said at the beginning, the idea seemed very good to me, and they are doing something that no one else does. But this isn't entirely true. They've turned an ordinary system into a ready-to-use emulation console. Together with a controller, it initially seems like an ideal combination. But if we dig a bit deeper, we'll see that this software, Retrobat, is open source and free for everyone. What they are actually doing is downloading it, loading it with a ton of games inside, and setting everything up for us almost perfectly. And in fact, I don't think what they are doing is wrong. Many will want to avoid this less user-friendly step, and you can tell the seller has done a good job at it. The customization layers for each game make it feel like a very well-finished product. So I want to be clear that we are not paying for this software, but for the customization and configuration they do, along, of course, with the computer and its controller, which we'll talk about in a second. To compare this and see if they actually add value to the product, I tried downloading Retrobat myself and using it on my GPD Win 4, and I encountered many issues with each different emulator I wanted to use. In fact, I couldn't even get some to start. That's why you have to value everything the seller has done beforehand so that everything just works. But keep in mind that still there are some things that need tweaks. In the PlayStation emulators, we have to recalibrate the controller to change the circle and cross buttons. Or in the Switch emulator, I had to recalibrate the entire controller. To add the cherry on top, in my past experience with emulation, I configured the PlayStation 2 PCCX in the past to make it look much better than the original version, with anisotropic filters and a full HD resolution. So I think, although they've configured everything and it works quite well, the final detail would have been to have the emulators configured to their fullest potential. For example, the PlayStation 1s are quite good, but some of the Nintendo still need final adjustments. A very positive thing is that for being an emulation machine, despite having such a low power processor, its secret weapon is that it has AVX, a technology capable of better virtualization. Therefore, if we use emulators with AVX, we can significantly improve performance. All of this brings us to the controller, which I already mentioned my thoughts on at the beginning, and after trying it, I have no complaints. In fact, at this point, most of us probably have one at home, so if ours is better, we can simply use that one. But for a product that aims to be a ready-to-use console, it's great that it comes with it. About the computer, here is the strange part. It's a common mini computer with this Intel N100, but it has something different. As we said at the beginning, it has two storage units. Well, the one with Windows installed is a 250 SSD, but the one with all the Retrobat system and its games is a 500 hard drive, and this seems like a problem to me. Although playing doesn't show it much, because games with heavy textures are unplayable anyway, talking about PS3 or Xbox 360. But there are two factors that make this much worse. Considering this is where we will store all the ROMs we download, the read and write speeds are very slow, and every time we load a game on it, we'll have to wait, and that's without considering it comes with barely any free space. They've loaded it with a ton of games, but we don't have much room to add the ones we want. I had to remove all the PlayStation 1 games to free up 50 GB of space and make enough space for everything I wanted to install. And this is painful to see. It's a bad decision because today hard drives are rudimentary and have prices very similar to SSDs, and by saving maybe 5%, I'm making this up, they're making the experience 20% worse. Not to mention that most games, in my opinion, are too old. I don't know about you, but I'm more interested in having PSP or PS2 titles, at most Game Boy, rather than so many Atari or arcade console games that only inflate the number of pre-installed games. And as a final complaint, the body that they decided to use for this computer seems somewhat inappropriate. It has the necessary connections on the back, except for the USB ports, which are all in the front. This means that you can't hide the cables if you want to place this computer somewhere. I think it would have been a good move on their part to make it look the same aesthetically as the less powerful Android unit they have on their website. It would have added a lot of value to use a retro style. And this leads us to one question. Is it worth it? It costs €205 on AliExpress when you add it to the cart with a 21% discount they always do, and we could probably reduce it even more with some discount codes. So although Retrobat software is free, the customization and configuration are also work. If we buy a mini computer with the same features on our own, it would cost almost the same price along with the controller, although I have seen some go for sale for 100 or even €70 that's on sales. If I find them, I'll leave them down below in the description. But the price has completely changed what I thought my conclusion would be on this product, because during the testing I thought the product was priced at €350 when it's actually almost half of it. If you're looking to emulate consoles up but not including PS3 or Xbox 360, this product is meant for you. Now, if we're talking about what would be the best hardware for emulation, that's a story for another video.